Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gilda Evans, bringing you the Autism Resource Podcast. This podcast and the ARP website are your one-stop knowledge and resource base for autism and much more. I'm happy to have Sara Langley join me as my guest today. Sara is a dedicated psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner specializing in the medication management of children and adolescents. She specializes in nutritional psychiatry, including how food impacts mood and behavior, as well as traditional medication management. She treats conditions such as ADHD, autism, depression, and anxiety. She is double board certified in primary care and psychiatry and is based in Beverly Hills, California. Welcome, Sara, and thank you so much for taking the time to join me and discuss the work that you do.
Thank you, Gilda. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. Thank you for taking me on this morning.
Well, to get started, tell me why you feel that nutritional psychiatry is so important in autism spectrum disorder, or ASD as it's called.
Thank you. Well, it's really a fantastic question. When we talk about nutritional psychiatry, what we're really talking about is the brain-gut axis. So think of it like this. We've all had that feeling of having butterflies in our stomach when we are nervous. That's a real physical connection. It's a two-way superhighway between our gut and our brain. Now, in autism, this connection is so important because we see two things happening all the time. We see GI distress. So a huge number of kids with autism spectrum struggle with major GI issues. So we're talking about chronic constipation, diarrhea, stomach pain, that kind of goes way beyond what you'd see in the general population, for example. Secondly, we see gut imbalances. So the community of trillions of bacteria living in the gut often look different between a neurodiverse child and a neurotypical child. In autism spectrum, there's less diversity and often an overgrowth of some of the less helpful, well, quite frankly, unhelpful microbes that can cause upset and distress. So why does this matter for the brain? Well, an imbalanced gut can lead to what we call a leaky gut, which triggers inflammation. And this inflammation doesn't just stay localized to their tummy, it kind of disperses and can impact the brain in some cases. So with nutritional psychiatry, it's not necessarily a cure because the responses to just making, nutritional changes to the diet are not going to be as robust as what we're going to see with the FDA-approved medications, for example, but it's still a supportive tool that we can use to provide care to a child that is comprehensive and kind of focuses on, the mind-body connection and, health in general. And by focusing on healing and the gut and calming that inflammation with food, we can often support the brain. And definitely the combination of medications and nutrition and supplementation, that combination is when I see the most benefit in autism.
So you mentioned supplementation.
Mhm.
How do you feel about supplements in general? And if you're a fan, which ones do you feel are the most helpful in ASD to support brain health, gut health, so forth?
Of course, thank you. So a quick reminder to everyone listening. So always talk to your healthcare professional or a registered dietitian, nutritionist before starting any new supplementation for your child, because what I'm giving isn't medical advice. It's just my personal viewpoint and what I've read in the research. So with regards to autism specifically, if a child's diet is very limited, supplementation can help kind of fill those nutritional gaps. Ultimately, with supplementation, with micronutrients, what we're doing is providing raw materials to the brain that it needs in order to make serotonin, in order to make dopamine and norepinephrine, because our brain makes its own supply. So the supplements or the micronutrients specific, or that I have found to be specifically helpful to autism spectrum, are going to be things like omega-3, for example, so fish oil. This is a big one because the brain is about 60% fat. And omega-3, specifically DHA, are the primary building blocks for the brain. And they're also incredibly anti-inflammatory. And if you think of inflammation in the brain as, like, fire in the brain, and the omegas are like the water that is going to put it out and help decrease that inflammation there. Another supplement would be vitamin D, so the sunshine vitamin, essentially. And for the most part, we are all running low in vitamin D, but the deficiency is especially prevalent in autism spectrum due to their more selective diet. Vitamin D acts as a hormone in the brain, and it's responsible and critical for immune function and regulating mood and making everybody just feel better. Other supplements that we can look at, other micronutrients we can consider, are things like the B vitamins, so B6, B12, and B9 folate. Essentially, this group of vitamins is the spark plug for the brain, and they are involved in a process called methylation, which is more or less just a fancy word for the biochemical switch that does everything. So it builds those special brain chemicals, the serotonin, the norepinephrine, the dopamine, and it helps the body detoxify. And for some children with autism spectrum, they have this genetic quirk, which makes it hard for them to use the standard form of these vitamins that we might find on the shelves in the pharmacy, for example. So you'll often hear about, methylated B vitamins or active forms of B vitamins like methyl B12, which just make it easier for children with this genetic quirk which makes it easier for them to absorb the B vitamins specifically. I also like magnesium. This is an anti-anxiety kind of calming micronutrient. Magnesium is involved in about 300 different reactions in the body. It helps relax the nervous system. It helps with sleep, anxiety, constipation. It helps kids who have that wound up, angsty feeling. So I like to add that typically in the evenings. And then finally, I'm a big fan of probiotics. And again, this is just to help support that brain-gut connection. And taking a good multi-strain probiotic is going to help reseed the gut with good, healthy, happy, friendly gut bacteria to help crowd out any nasty gut bacteria that might be hanging around and causing symptoms. And it also just provides that foundation for good brain health.
All right. Now, you mentioned micronutrients,
Mhm.
and you do talk about children being deficient in certain
Mhm.
micronutrients.
Mhm.
So how does this relate to ASD specifically? Can you elaborate on that just a bit?
Of course. So, for many children with autism spectrum disorder specifically, there is a profound challenge rooted in just issues with food sensitivity. So, there is an oversensitivity with textures. So, imagine having your senses turned up to like a 10, and the texture of a raspberry might feel slimy or unbearable in the mouth, and the smell of fish cooking might be so overwhelming that it's gag worthy. And any green colors on your plate might be genuinely distressing to you. Like, that's the oversensitization that children with autism can feel with certain foods. There's also that need for sameness. So there's that intense need for routine and predictability, which can mean that a child will only eat, a specific brand of chicken nuggets, or like a specific shape of pasta, or a food that is always that same, beige color, those beige foods that we're familiar with. So when you combine these two traits, so that causes the diet to shrink somewhat considerably, and the menu becomes very limited, often boiling down to just a handful of safe foods. So almost universally, these safe foods are going to be processed carbohydrates, unfortunately. So plain pasta, crackers, French fries, bread, and chicken nuggets. And then, so what's missing? Well, everything else is missing: the fruits, the vegetables, the fish, dairy, other proteins, for example. And this is where we start to see those nutritional gaps. So then our brains aren't getting those building blocks that they need to make, again, going back to those going back to those neurotransmitters. They don't have the building blocks to make the serotonin, the dopamine, the norepinephrine, and then we get that mood dysregulation. And there's also a second part to this. So even if you can convince a child with autism spectrum to eat, good foods, better foods, their gut is at baseline inflamed and sensitive. So even when you are putting these nutrients back in, they may not be able to absorb the nutrients efficiently, or, like pull the nutrition from the food that they need. So it's like a double whammy in that respect.
Okay. Well, that certainly makes a lot of sense. I do know that you also refer to something called mitochondrial dysfunction. There, I said it.
Yes.
So, um, tell us a little bit about
Mhm.
that, also more in relation to ASD and how that affects the gut and the mood and so on and so forth.
Of course. So, mitochondria are found in nearly every cell of the body. They are essentially tiny power stations located inside cells that produce energy. And this energy allows our cells to keep on doing what they do best, which is to keep us alive and well. But they also produce a waste substance in much the same way as a factory does. And this waste substance is called reactive oxygen species. So, mitochondrial dysfunction is the equivalent of a nuclear power station experiencing out of control reactions and melting down and pretty much destroying the neighborhood. In mitochondrial dysfunction, the excessive production of reactive oxygen species is going to overwhelm those safeguards in place. The safeguards are called antioxidants, which all of our bodies produce in order to neutralize the reactive oxygen species. So, antioxidants are also found in foods we eat, and they're predominantly found in like bright, colorful fruits and vegetables. Again, foods that a child with ASD might um, divert away from or have sensitivities towards. So, the mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress, are what are causing the oxidative issues that are going on and the inflammation essentially. So, as I mentioned, under normal circumstances, the body does a decent job of neutralizing the reactive oxygen species with antioxidants, breaking them down and getting rid of them. But that process isn't happening as effectively in autism spectrum disorder. And this then causes damage to surrounding cells, to cells of the brain, for example, and can worsen any underlying autism spectrum symptoms that you may see going on.
So, in order to counter that,
Mhm.
what do you suggest is the best way to counter that? And I'm also curious, without naming names, if you
Mhm.
speak from personal experience, can you give a couple of examples of personal stories that you've encountered with clients that are successful, so some success stories
Mhm.
in ways that you've guided clients to change their habits, incorporate other things into their diets. How have you done this and what results have you seen?
Right. So in terms of, sorry, Gilda, what was the first question?
Um, in other words, if you have this mitochondrial dysfunction going
Mhm.
on, what
Yes.
what's the best way to counter that? What kind of foods or supplements can you introduce in order to provide those antioxidants and other needed elements for the body to counter that and to process
Mhm.
things correctly? And then any
Mhm.
success stories that you'd like to share?
Thank you. So, in terms of countering the oxidative stress happening in the body, it's going to be tricky, as you mentioned, because of the picky eating habits to try to encourage a child with autism spectrum to eat fruits, vegetables that are brightly colored and full of antioxidants. That's going to be hard. What is slightly easier, though, again, not guaranteed that it will work, but what is slightly easier is to use antioxidants in capsule form, in liquid form, in pill form. So the omega-3s, as mentioned, those contain antioxidants that can be helpful. Omega-3s, again, there might be an issue with texture that gets kind of fishy. It's a little bit smelly, but there are some brands that mask the smell and the taste with lemon or strawberry. Nordic Naturals is one of them, which I like to use. There's also a liquid form that you can use, especially if swallowing the capsules is going to be more challenging for younger children. They make gummies as well, and the gummies might be more palpable. Other antioxidants, I mean, if you are at home cooking and you can introduce things like turmeric, cinnamon, spices contain phenols, and the phenols themselves are anti-inflammatory. So if you're able to like slip those in somehow into a meal, like cinnamon, saffron, turmeric, black pepper, that's an easy kind of like organic, natural way to get that in without having to purchase supplements separately. CoQ10 enzyme is quite a powerful antioxidant. So that's another one that you can try to introduce in the diet. It's brightly colored orange-ish. So you may have some difficulty masking it in a safe food. So essentially, if you can use the Trojan horse method, which is taking those supplements, those capsules full of powders, those liquids, and kind of combining them with a safe food that your child already eats to kind of mask it and hide it in there. That might be an easier, but again, not guaranteed way, but an easy way to potentially incorporate antioxidant containing supplements into the food. And there are going to be other supplements. I think there's one by Pure Encapsulations. If you just let me look that up, let's see.
Chris, you can edit out this silence once.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
no
think
worries.
of the name. Polyphenol, let's see, it was the antioxidant one. So find it. So I'm glad we have the hour together. I can find it. I knew it sounds.
That's all right. That's all right. We can we you it, if you can't find it quickly, it's all right. You can just proceed. Just say,
Sorry.
anyway, can't find it now, but but
Yes.
yes, that's definitely, the one way you can try it. And then if you want to share some success stories. So if you want to start wherever you'd like to jump back in.
Thank you. In terms of success stories, I mean, it's when I do my initial consultations with families and bring the children in, I have a little slideshow that I show them in terms of how their bodies and brains make specific neurotransmitters, brain chemicals. And so it's a diagram of a conveyor belt, essentially, where we start with the protein at one end and then the neurotransmitters at the other end. And then along the way, they're seeing all of those micronutrients being added in order to produce the final product. And I find that typically for like late elementary, middle, and certainly high schoolers, that's the light switch goes on in terms of they start to understand, oh, what I put in my body impacts mood and behavior. So it gives those children an appreciation for potentially trying to incorporate a more broad diet, or at least understanding why, like mom and dad for years have been saying that I need to eat more fruits, more vegetables, because those contain our B vitamins, and those contain zinc and all these other minerals and micronutrients that we need in order to produce our feel-good chemicals, essentially. So I think that just by providing that psychoeducation, providing that information in terms of making that link between what they eat and why it's helpful in the long run can somewhat help shift eating habits, or at least encourage them to try to expand their palate somewhat. So that helps 20%, and all, like, for full transparency in terms of like adjusting the diet for a particular child with ADHD who may be experiencing, anxiety, depression, other symptoms. Adjusting the diet is helpful. As mentioned, the response is not going to be as robust as an FDA medication for anxiety, as an FDA-approved medication for depression, but it certainly provides them with at least those building blocks, and for healthy future eating habits, and for just again, like healthy eating habits and health into adulthood and down the road. So yes, that can be helpful.
All right. Well, that all certainly is, I think, good advice and makes a lot of sense. And I want to also thank you, Sara, very much for your time and for sharing your story and information with us today.
Thank you, Gilda. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on today.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, and other popular platforms. We'd appreciate you taking the time to leave us a review. You can also listen to the podcast on YouTube at ARP Social, where you'll find bonus content. And be sure to follow us on Facebook or Instagram to get up-to-date notifications about the latest news and episodes. If you would like more information on anything else we've covered on the Autism Resource Podcast, visit us online at autismresourceproject.org/podcast. Be sure to check out our growing website often, since we are continually adding useful information and resources. I want to thank our listeners for spending part of their day with us. This is the Autism Resource Podcast, and I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.